Trump's noble moment waiving executive privilege on Mueller's report. Editors note the opinions in this article are the authors, as published by our content partner, and do not necessarily represent the views of MSN or Microsoft. Attorney General Bill Barr sent a letter to Congress on Friday, stating that he intends to release a public version of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report in a matter of weeks. As with last Sunday, however, the most notable line of Barr's letter was largely overlooked. Indeed, Barr stated that the waiver of executive privilege has gone with nary a mention in coverage, as has the impressive speed and scope of Barr's disclosure in handling the report. Yet, many of us have criticized Trump for inappropriate comments that undermine the integrity and dignity of his office. That will be a last. In his letter to Congress, Barr noted that although that line means Barr will confine his redactions of the report to 4 well-recognized areas: classified information, privacy-protected information, information related to ongoing investigations, and grand jury information. Mueller reported that Trump could have claimed sweeping privilege and tied up the report in the courts for much of the remaining 2 years of his term. Although Democrat, while Trump consented to Mueller interviewing his close aides, the disclosures made to Mueller were not waivers of privilege because Mueller is part of Trump's Justice Department. Conversely, even before this decision to waive privilege, Trump allowed far greater transparency than his predecessors. President Barack Obama was repeatedly criticized for his sweeping claims of executive privilege and refusal to comply with Congressional Oversight Committee investigations. The same congressional Democrats, now clamoring for disclosure on Mueller, were conspicuously silent when President Obama refused clearly appropriate demands for disclosure in such investigations. District Judge while Obama pledged to be the most transparent president in history, he immediately sought to prevent disclosures to the public and the media. If you separate his rhetoric from his actions, Trump's record has been more limited in his claims compared presidents like Obama, who readily embraced notions of the imperial. Other presidents, such as George W. Bush, lost key court challenges to their own excessive claims of executive privilege. Bill Clinton invoked. That is why Trump has been something of an enigma, legally. None of this fits an easy narrative. It is hard to praise. Trump's handling of the special counsel investigation and report reflects this anomaly. While Trump was, as for the report, Barr shocked Washington with the speed by which he released the summary of Mueller's conclusions. He now is on track. That sounds a lot like transparency, and that is something we have not seen from a president in a very long time. The irony is that the report does not, as Trump claims, totally. However, Trump has built an undeniable record of transparency during this investigation that could be cited for years by advocates as a gold standard for future investigations. That's right, Trump could have created a legacy here, and it does not involve an all-caps tweet. Jonathan Turley is the Shapiro Professor of Public Interest Law at George Washington University. You can follow him on
Raindrop, drip, drop top, top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that.